All right. And so now you all see the title slide, right?
Yep. And
Okay.
Paul, let me give you a quick introduction here, and then we will be on the way.
Okay.
Paul's a member of CVARC, our club here that is putting on these classes. He's been a ham for 3 years, a hiker, trail runner, and bicyclist since the 1970s. He was inspired to try SOTA by Scott, WA9STI, who gave a presentation to CVARC in 2019. He had been operating indoors for fun, including HF, but when the pandemic came, he got serious about it and started activating local hilltops around the Conejo Valley. At first, he just took his handheld, not and did VHF, but was soon carrying a Yaesu 857 up the hills to try out CW on patient chasers. He's now got over 50 summit activations and a complete rig that weighs just 1 kilo. He gets DX from hilltops with 5 watts that he could never get from his home with 100, and has communicated with hundreds of activators and chasers who share this passion. And he's looking forward to the day when he can do a dual activation, and I'm sure you will let us know what that means as well, Paul. So over to you.
Oh, I just mean when I can go hiking with somebody else instead of being under the rules we are during the pandemic. That's all. And my point was that I've always been interested in activating outdoors, but SOTA really gave me a pathway and to do it effectively and interestingly. And so I'm really literally following in the footsteps of others like Scott, WA9STI, and all the other people I've read about and talked to in CVARC, and in particular the SoCal SOTA group, which I'm going to describe a bit more later. There are, as with other hams, they're a gregarious bunch, and they're happy to help. So let me describe a little bit about what SOTA is for you. I'll tell you this, I've been doing this fairly intensively, almost every weekend for the past 10 months. And I still learn something every time I go out, and from every meeting I'm in, and I trust this one I'll learn something too. So please don't expect to learn it all from me here today. My goal is to give you an introduction, a starting point, a way to get going, and to hopefully put you on a journey like mine, which has been so satisfying for me. SOTA goes to some pains to describe how it is not a contest. Even though we get points, we're not competing against each other, we're helping each other acquire these points. And there are really 2 participants, just as there are with any other ham radio contact. It's just that we call one of them the activator and the other the chaser. And in certain cases even, both the activator and the chaser can be on summits. In that case, it would be a summit to summit. But for that particular contact, I get points for being the activator and points for being the chaser. There is a SOTA database that is established to coordinate all of this. It's something that you can look at and get an account on for free and see everybody in the world is doing this. And actually, it's very, very popular in Europe. And in Japan, New Zealand, Australia, many countries in the world have well-established groups of SOTA operators. And most countries in the world have an established set of SOTA peaks. I'm going to pause there for any questions so far. All right. There are some basic rules as to how SOTA peaks get designated. They come from topographic analysis, and the basic rule is that a summit has to be 150 meters high. and 150 meters above the terrain around it. So even a tall mountain may not be a SOTA peak because there's a taller one nearby. And if you don't have to descend 150 meters in order to get to the next taller one, it won't count. So that this is the concept of prominence. And in addition to that, SOTA peaks are assigned different point values depending upon their altitude, and different associations establish what that range is. SOTA peaks range between 1 and 10 points. The peaks around the Conejo Valley are between 1 and 2 points. But the point value says nothing about the actual difficulty of getting to one of these peaks. It only says something about the elevation. There are, in addition, bonus points for certain peaks in our association, and ours is Whiskey 6, which it corresponds exactly to the geographic locators in our licenses. So if you're in California, you're a 6. If you're in Arizona, you're a Whiskey 7 Alpha, and so on. In Whiskey 6 here, in certain areas, if you're above 6,500 feet in elevation, you can get a winter bonus of 3 points. So there's peaks up to 13 points value right now. There's also summer bonuses for some of the desert peaks. Now, when you go to the top of the mountain, you don't have to sit on the exact point that is highest. You can sit anywhere that is within 25 meters elevation. There's a historical note about this. Earlier on in SOTA, in the United States, we used 500 feet for the absolute elevation and prominence, and 75 feet for the activation area. Well, it turns out 500 feet is just a little bit more than 150 meters. So some peaks were added when we changed to metric. And the activation zone also grew because the 25 meters is a little bit more than 75 feet. It's about 82 feet. And so that changed both the number of peaks and the area on which you could sit in order to do your radio contact. Because this activation area is 25 meters, if it has a flat top, there's a really large area that you could be in. One note about that is that contacts within the same activation area don't count as summit to summit contacts. Even if the activation area is 2 miles long and you're at one end and I'm at the other and we talk to each other, we don't get to count that as a contact. We must be on different summits in different activation areas. Any questions about that? I know that Bill was interested in this because, okay, go ahead.
Hi, Paul. This is WAYZ Victor. So I was not sure how all the names came to the peaks. I know that W6 is the big area, but there are different sub names like SC and
That's right.
CT. So how are these named? Do you know? And
I do.
okay.
And California has a dozen or so of these different districts, and in our area you'll see peaks that are designated as Whiskey 6 stroke Sierra Charlie, SC, South Coast, okay? And then a dash and a 3-letter identifier. I'm going to show some of these in a minute. And then you'll see CC for Central Coast, or a CT, which stands for Transverse Ranges, go figure, and SD for Southern Desert, and so on. What's a little confusing is because of the history of the way these peaks were established, that you can find a CC peak next to a CT peak next to an SC peak. So they are not discrete geographic areas. They are overlapped, okay?
That's the confusing part about overlapping. But thanks, if you cover it, thanks.
All right. Any more questions before I move on? Okay. As I mentioned, the point value doesn't affect the, it isn't determined by the actual difficulty of reaching the summit, it's just by the altitude. But in all cases, the SOTA rule is that you must be away from your vehicle and use a portable power source. So as compared with parks on the air, in parks on the air, you can drive up and use the radio in your car. I think I'm correct about that. Who's our POTA person? We had someone there who was doing parks on the air and just contrasting this.
Hey, Paul, it's Craig. I've just gotten into parks on the air in the last month or so, and you're right. You can sit in your car and operate, or you can take your equipment and set in a park bench on battery. There's really no restriction on how you do that.
Okay. If you could do a dual activation if you meet the rules for both. If your peak is in a park and you're away from your vehicle, you can sit there and you can gain SOTA points for your POTA contacts and vice versa, I believe. There's in this area, there's the opportunity for a triple. There's also something called islands on the air. And if you go to Santa Cruz Island, which is in a park, there's a mountain that's a SOTA peak. So there's many possibilities there. So doing SOTA can be as simple as this. In fact, I could spend a year every week working every weekend the peaks around the LA basin and, probably get 100 peaks and thousands of contacts with just this. And I recommend that you start off by using an HT and doing Vhf contacts. There are multiple ways to spot yourself that we're going to talk about, but the easiest one, and some of you all have heard me do it locally, is I'll get on Bozo and say I'm doing a SOTA activation of Simi Peak, for example. Please call me on 146.445 so we can make our simplex connection. And so that is perfectly legal to go spot yourself using a local repeater. And even when I go to other places like Arizona, I will call on the local repeater and drum up some contacts. HTs are a great way to do SOTA work. And because you're on a peak, they work really, really well for long distances. My longest contact was with an HT similar to this from Ray's Peak to a mountain in southern San Diego County, 190-mile haul, just HT to HT, not even using that Yagi that's growing out of the top of my head back there. So don't discount the value of taking your HT along. I've even done SOTA activations on the spur of the moment. I've been out on a hike, I had my radio, I thought, well, geez, if I just go up there, I could do a SOTA activation. And I did. However, the real action on SOTA worldwide is on the HF bands. And on the HF bands, the best way to make SOTA contacts is with CW. And that's in part because of all of the advantages that you all are probably familiar with CW, that the signal is concentrated in a small part of bandwidth and can be heard even in difficult conditions and with low power transmissions. SOTA operators use the QRP frequencies, a frequency of 14.060 a lot. And if you go there, and you will almost certainly have a pileup. And I routinely get DX with 20 meters as of recently on, and I'm going to show you, in fact, let me stop sharing for a minute. Let's see. Can you see well, I'm going to talk about equipment more in a minute, but you can see something that says, there's one of us that says K6PVZ bench, and there's 3 different QRP radios on there that I have. And I've made DX contacts with 2 of them and hope to make a DX contact with the 3rd soon.
Paul, we don't see it.
Okay. This is the part where I need to make it bigger, right, Keith?
What you can do is if you click on it, if you go to the gallery view and you click on it or double click, it'll come into large focus. That's what I just did.
Yes, anybody can do that. Or I think, Paul, if you share that camera, everybody will see it.
Okay. I'm
Do it.
going to continue for the moment, and I'll try that when I get to the actual equipment part here. There's one exception to the simplex rule, which is kind of like the exception we have during field day, and that is you can make valid SOTA contacts with the ham satellites. I've made a VHF contact to Florida with one of the ham satellites. So that's not during a SOTA activation, as it turned out. But if you want to carry your Yagi up there in a couple of HTs, you know, go for it. That'd be a neat thing to do. Any questions about this before I move on? Let's see. Okay, you all can see my screen that says chasing now, right? Okay. So SOTA is nothing without chasers. This is a partnership we're in. Whether you're in your shack or outdoors with your HT or on another summit. And it's really easy to find SOTA chasers on SOTA Watch or with an app like this SOTA Spotter that I have on my Android phone. It is updated quickly, and you can see that they, in this case, it looks like they're all US, but what's interesting is as you work into the afternoon, the Japanese stations start to come on, and then the New Zealand stations and Australian stations will come on. And it's always exciting for me to make a JA contact or a ZL contact. In fact, I have done a summit-to-summit contact with Japan. 2 QRP radios across the Pacific. That was a thrill. I started out by recording all my contacts on paper. I put a paper log on a clipboard, and I scribbled away and did it all. After a while, I noticed that other people were using different logging programs on their phone. And one of them, I have a reference for at the end. There are a number of different phone loggers, but there is one called OutD-Log that is geared towards SOTA operators particularly. And it knows things about SOTA that make data entry faster. Now, you may have heard the term Mountain Goat, which is the award for getting 1,000 SOTA points. There is the corresponding award, and I've mentioned, called Shack Sloth. And that's actually easier to get to because no matter how many contacts I make beyond the required 4 on top of a summit, I'm only going to get the points for that summit, whether it's a 1-pointer or a 10-pointer with a winter bonus, even if I make 50 contacts. But if you, in your shack, call up and chase 20 different people during the day, you will get points towards Shack Sloth for all of those. You could rack up 100 points in a day. What I will tell you is that almost everybody on these peaks is using some kind of low-powered radio setup, at most 100 watts, because bringing batteries up to power anything bigger is prohibitive. So particularly from my QTH, it's tough to hear them. I often hear other chasers calling, but many times I won't hear the actual activator, him or herself. The danger with that, of course, is that you'll step on the activator. So please be careful about that. And in particular, when a summit to summit is happening, those are often QRP radios that are talking to each other, and you may not hear either of them. As an activator, I can tell you that having somebody with a high-powered contest station who's a regular chaser can pretty well obliterate a summit to summit contact. So please be careful about that when you're chasing, especially if you have big power, a beam, or whatever. Also, while you're in your comfortable chair, somebody on a peak, right now people are in windy and cold conditions. They're trying to get it done. Their fingers don't work on the key very well. All kinds of things that we don't have to deal with in the shack are going on. So it helps to be patient, and I often don't hear call signs correctly, in part because of ambient noise if it's windy. I wear earbuds that are actually a little different than the ones I've got in my head right now. They're the plug kind, but still there are distractions there. And I do need to be aware of my surroundings up there. Not only do I need to be concerned about weather, but if I'm sitting in a precarious place, or there's animals, or any of the other things that you can imagine going on a mountain peak that might be interfering with my ability to talk to you when you're chasing me. You got any questions about these things? I'm sure you all might have some funny stories too.
Paul?
Yes.
Well, one question which has concerned me about operating here, maybe unnecessarily, but is it pretty much April, the rattlesnakes come out? Have you had any experiences you want to share with rattlesnakes, or you've never seen them?
Well, as a regular hiker and run around here, I see them occasionally. Mm-hmm. Let me just address rattlesnakes and hiking dangers in general, because they're a serious part of SOTA, and frankly, your time as an activator, most of it is going to be spent in travel, particularly to more difficult peaks. Whether you drive an hour to the point where you start hiking, and then start walking or bicycling, but in my activations, I spend more time in the travel part than I do in the activation part, and so that's what I really prepare for. Yes, snakes are coming out now. I saw my first gopher snake on a trail 2 days ago. And he was just frozen in place, kind of literally. He was out in the sun, but I walked right up to him, and I don't think he could move. He was too cold with the cold weather, and I was really surprised to see him out. The profile in an emergency room of a rattlesnake bite victim is an 18 to 24-year-old male. Okay. People rarely get bitten by rattlesnakes just walking along a trail or even through high grass. People get bitten by rattlesnakes because they play with them, okay? Because they poke a stick at them and say, check this out. And they want to take a selfie with a rattlesnake. Something stupid, right?
Yeah. Paul, I'm just going to throw in there, having been a National Parks volunteer, we were given a lot of information on how to keep ourselves safe. About 95% of the rattlesnake bites that present at California hospitals are on the hands and forearms.
Okay. I was going to say, I wear boots, and long pants. And when I'm walking through heavy brush, I wear gaiters. And so it's unlikely that a snake is going to make it through that, even if I totally surprise it. And notably, Keith, you're right about that. The closest I've come to a snake bite is I was climbing a mountain in Baja, California, and I put my hand out down on a rock, and I couldn't see around the rock. And right on the other side was a baby rattlesnake. So, yeah. And rattlesnakes really don't like you. They'd rather be away. And if you give them any chance at all to leave, first they're going to warn you, and they're going to try to get out of your way. Frankly, I'm much more concerned about falls. I've had one relatively serious medical event due to a SOTA activation. And that was because I unwittingly brushed against the poodle dog bush. Anybody know what this is? Well, it's notable that nobody's answering, because I had heard of it, but I didn't know what it looked like. I am very allergic to poison oak. I know what to look for, and I avoid it literally like the plague. And I know, and I have in the back of my car, I have a bottle of this special soap called Technu, which I will wash myself as quickly as I can with in order to remove the poison oak oils, because I could go to the hospital with a reaction from poison oak. The poodle dog bush is very common in burnt over areas. And earlier last year, I was in the Los Padres forest in an area burned by the Thomas fire. And there was this beautiful big plant with blue flowers. And I just kept pushing them aside as I mountain biked down a trail. And I could show you the picture of the rash on my legs that occurred afterwards, but I really don't want to gross you out. So there, don't worry, I'm not going to show it to you. I ended up needing medical treatment and steroids and something to control that rash. So falls are probably the most dangerous thing. In particular, I spend most of my time out there alone, and I do a lot of activations on a bicycle. So I'm going on trails and dirt roads. And so if I wrecked my bicycle, I could knock myself silly. I often wear a full face helmet on the bicycle just for that reason. But in practice, the thing that's got me is the vegetation, because I'm allergic to it. We have lots and lots of burnt over areas. So if you're going to one, look up poodle dog bush and beware, okay? Any more questions or comments about safety? Because that's important for activations. I don't think many of you are going to be tackling alpine stuff or snowy stuff, but if you do, there's a whole other set of risks that go with that you should learn about and be familiar with before you add the complication of trying to fuss around with radios up there. You should know what you're doing first without trying to add radios to the mix. Okay? So, where are the summits? There are a number of different applications for this. My favorite is the one pictured here. It works great on my phone. This is a screen capture from my phone that I just brought up in a web browser. There are also a couple of apps, I think for the iPhone particularly, that work well. But when I'm thinking about doing a SOTA activation, this is where I go first. You can see this is the westernmost portion of the Santa Monica Mountains. And I happen to have been to all of these places except for Round Mountain, which is closed to us right now. It is controlled by the the state university, which in turn has restricted its use based on its significance to the Chumash tribe. But I have been to La Jolla Peak twice on there. So 2 of the 3 activations are mine. And I'll tell you a quick tip for picking a place to go. Don't pick one with a low number of activations for your initial forays into this. Pick one that's got a lot. They are a simple poll of popularity. And because a peak is unpopular generally means it's difficult to get to. So La Jolla Peak, the first time I activated it, I went on my mountain bike from the Wendy Drive parking area off Potrero Road. It's a 20-mile round trip that has hills, significant hills both ways, and requires a push through some scratchy vegetation. It was sort of an all-day thing, and I did it in hot weather, and I was exhausted. So I wanted to try the easy way, and so I started just a few weeks ago. I came in on a cool day from Pacific Coast Highway. I rode my mountain bike. That's only a 16-mile round trip, but it required a 1-mile push each way through heavy head-high brush. That's why there's only 3 activations there. So pick one that has a lot, because odds are it's easy. In SOTA Atlas, you can click on these and it will lead to more information, including reports about activations by others. In the references and the resources in the back of my presentation here, I've got listings of a couple of activators who regularly post descriptions of their activations. And I have used other people's descriptions as guides to how to get to different peaks. That's the part about hiking in the footsteps of others. You don't have to be a pioneer. And I don't recommend it at first. Do the easy ones, go where other people have gone, learn what it takes, and then if you want a challenge, go do La Jolla Peak. Spend all day getting your 1 point. I mentioned the SOTA database earlier and how I either log things on paper and enter them in by hand when I get home, or I use more often now OutDlog to put them in there. And the SOTA database will keep track of everything you've done, and it will list your potential accomplishments. It's really a lovely resource that they have created for us, and it's free. Are there any questions about this before I go on? No? So as hams, I imagine that this is the part that we're most interested in. This is me exactly 1 week ago on a peak called West Butte in the Anza-Borrego Desert. I was out there camping with my wife. The 2 of us walked up there. Not a difficult hike at all. It's near a very popular place called the Slot, and the views were spectacular. You know, winter is the time to be in the low desert. And you can see that I have worked my way down to a very compact setup. I started by carrying my Yaesu 857 radio up the hill. That's a great radio and works well for SOTA. And it's also a 100-watt radio. If you want to run it at 100 watts, though, you're going to need a big battery. I'm going to reach behind me here for a moment and get some equipment. I don't have the Yaesu is mounted in the car, but I'm going to start picking up some of the things that I used at first. Can you still hear me okay?
Sounds great.
Yes.
Okay, good. So the first thing I did is I went and I got a couple of these fiberglass poles from MFJ. What I learned really fast is that the last couple of sections are too delicate to be useful. I snapped them off almost immediately. For certain projects, these things are great. They you know, with the last two sections, they're 33 feet, but with those gone, this is, you know, more like 25 feet. So I carried this up a few hills, and then I got tired of that. So I went and found stuff from a company called Sota Beams, which is British. Goes with the origin of Sota being in Britain. And I got a much smaller one. Now this is only about 18 feet high, but it turns out it's plenty. It's called a Tactical Mini. And all of these, I don't know if you've ever experienced these things, are sort of like a Russian doll of nested pieces. And they come out like this. You gotta be careful with this thing in the house. Most recently, as part of my 1 kilo rig, I read, and again, I learned from my fellow Sota operators, that there is this fishing pole available online from Amazon. It costs about $35. Its last two segments are far too delicate. And of course, I snapped them off almost immediately. But it's actually longer than the Tactical Mini. And for lightweight antennas, it works fine. It says, notice this says 7.2 meters on it. It's 11 sections. So that is part of how I get the antenna up in the air. I started out by buying an end-fed random wire from Chameleon Antenna that has, let's see, 60 feet of wire on a winder. It's very nice wire that they sell too, because it's coated in Teflon. It's pretty easy to pull through vegetation. And a balun that's this big. This works great. You know, it can be used for 100 watts or more. It's pretty sturdy. It's fallen on the ground many times and come apart only once, and I just glued it back together. It was good. But you can see that, you know, with the big pole, the big radio, the big battery, the big balun, you can't hike very far with all that stuff without being really strong. And I just had one of those birthdays that has a 0 in it. And so I've been focused on getting stuff that's smaller and still works. So I went for a dipole, and there's actually 3 wire winders here. This is a 20 to 40 meter dipole. And what's going on here is the dipole has 2 legs. Each leg has an alligator clip in the middle, so I can make it short for 20 or long for 40. And then it has an anchor line piece of lightweight paracord at the end. This winder has the feed line in it and another anchor, so that I can set up a dipole with a center that's on the top of one of those fiberglass poles. So now I've got something here that weighs a pound or less, and it's much easier to carry up there. I've got some other antennas too here that are pretty useful for this. This is a 10 meter antenna, kind of like a J pole, that I'll put up vertically on the pole. Okay, so that if you're doing 10 meters or something like that, this is easy. But obviously, it doesn't. This isn't going to work for 20 or 40 because you can't get a pole that's long enough. Here's the 6 meter version, and here's something I use a lot. This is a 2 meter roll-up J pole, and so I hang that on the top of my pole, and I will use that for VHF activation, either with my HT or one of my radios, or one of my other radios, which I will show you here in just a minute. So let's see, I'm gonna pick this up from the bench one. This is a 20 meter end-fed antenna that it's a kit that you can get from QRP guys, or you can actually get the ballon and the winder for less money assembled on eBay. So it was about $16 on eBay. Plus I added this 26 gauge wire to it. I don't know. I've got 3 or 4 ounces here, and I don't need much of a feed line. The benefit of the end-fed antenna is that you can feed it from near the radio, and so all I need is a little bit of feed line. Any questions about this so far? Because I'm going to show you more stuff.
Do you use a choke of some sort?
Ah, good question. I don't use this. Yes, here. When I'm doing, I don't bother with a choke when I'm doing CW, but if I'm doing SSB on some radios, it turns out the end-fed antenna does need a choke, and so I built one, and I've got one of those boxes full of toroids and things that come from was it Palomar Engineers, and so I just made this with a short piece of coax. This works really well. It weighs more than my antenna. So I could do much better than that. And I have a little project here I'm working up on the bench to wind toroids the way you see them in the radio, with magnet wire on around a little toroid that would be much lighter than this, but this works. So I've discussed antennas and poles. Let's discuss radios. I've mentioned the 857. One of the next radios I got was, I was looking at QRP radios, and I ended up buying a Chinese QRP radio called a Xiegu G1M. I thought, well, I'll take a swing at this. It's cheaper than some of the CW only radios, and it does SSB, and it actually does it quite well. I made a contact to New Zealand one evening from Sandstone Peak with this radio and the end fed with the big ballon here. So it works. It does SSB. It has this is actually a software-defined radio inside. It's a pretty modern piece of gear. It has some quirks, and many people have reported problems with reliability with these. Mine works. And I think you can get them for about 250 bucks. Another way to go is to do it yourself. And I recently built, and some of you guys may have seen my comments about this on the groups.io group for the club. This is a QCX Plus, a kit built radio. Cost $75 at the case and several evenings of my time. It was fun to build, and it works just as well as all the other QRP radios on the one band that it's good for. I bought it in 17 meters, and we can talk a little bit about what bands are good for what in a minute. The picture you saw of me briefly there was this radio mounted on this knee board. This is a well-known QRP radio amongst SOTA activators. It's called a mountain topper, and they're only occasionally in production. So I managed to get on their list for their latest batch in December. I got it in January, and it's a very nice piece of kit that's very minimal. It doesn't even, notice the lack of knobs. There isn't even one knob on this. And things like volume control, well, that's set at the factory. but it works very effectively. From that operating position with this antenna on Saturday, I made a contact with France. Of course, the guy in France probably has a beam and 1,000 watts. Now, the benefit of the small radios, this is my battery family here, okay? Whoop. The benefit of the smallest radios is that you can run them on a small battery. The CW only rigs don't take much power, and this is good for hours of operation. The Zygu takes more power because it's a software-defined radio, and so it gets this battery. And I'm going to show you one other radio here. This is a BioNO 4.5 amp hour battery, and this is the BioNO 9 amp hour battery. And this is a couple of pounds. It starts to be a real chunk to carry around. I bought myself a treat last year. This is an Icom Ic705. It's a wonderful radio to have along, but it's pretty big and it takes a fair bit of power, but it works all bands and all modes. It is a lovely radio in my experience. Victor has one, and he and I have talked back and forth in many modes. And it's notable that for SOTA contact, any mode is okay. So, you know, we've done things like D-Star simplex. That's a valid contact for SOTA, right? We have also done, not with this radio necessarily, but we've done WinLink peer-to-peer. That's a valid SOTA contact. Could do that. Now I've got Andy's attention, I bet, because so this radio does it all. Having the waterfall display allows you to see what's going on. It's just a great thing. It's 5 watts on its internal battery. It has an HT battery that's clipped on the back. When I combine it with this battery, it'll run 10 watts. And one more thing here. This is an amplifier that I bought online from Radioddity. This is actually the second one. The first one broke. But the combination of this and the Ic705 and this battery, since this thing draws 10 amps, will give me 100 watts.
Question, Paul?
Yes, Victor.
Have you done FT8 yet on SOTA?
I have not. Okay.
You should try that.
Well, that's one more piece of equipment. That means that you're going to drag a laptop up there too. And that would be true as well for WinLink peer-to-peer. But hey, why not? Bring as much as you can carry. So that is a brief rundown of the equipment that I have used. There's a few more things, but all of those things work, and you can imagine how some of them work better than others, given your circumstances, like how far you're walking, what you're carrying it in. For example, this is the backpack that I wear when hiking a long way or on my mountain bike. Right now, most of the weight in it is water. And, you know, I'll use it all when I'm on a long activation, especially in the summer. You know, you don't want to skimp on the things that you need, because remember, the activation is mostly about the getting there. Oh, one other small thing. I have a couple of these teeny weeny camera tripods, and I've set up all of these radios. The Ic705 comes with a hole for a threaded hole on the bottom for these. They're really great for setting up the radio outside. And my one indulgence that I take is my seat pad. This is, it's 24 grams of foam. So while it's bulky, it's worth it, especially on a cold day or a rocky place. It'll keep parts of you warmer and enable you to sit longer. I usually just sit cross-legged on the ground. A lot of people bring along a portable stool or something. There's some really nice light ones. All right. Any questions about equipment? Oh, Andy's got one.
Hey, Paul, could you go back to that, the fishing rod mast?
Yes.
Be interested in getting the details on that one.
Okay. The name you want to look for is this Go Tour. It's on Amazon. Goture. They sell in different sizes. Get the biggest one.
And Paul, you might unshare your screen for a moment. So
Oops.
Paul, could I make a comment on those fishing poles?
Yeah. Have I been showing my screen and not my equipment the whole time?
Yes.
Oh, crap. All right.
We could see it though. Hey, Paul, could I make a comment on the fishing poles?
Sure, go ahead.
Um,
Sounds like you got some
You're talking
experience.
about breaking off the tips. We've all done it.
Yeah, it's
What
happened.
really helps is leaving those, the top two sections that always break,
Mhm.
pull them into the third section down, and it makes that third section real stiff. And then you won't get so much bend over on your pole. And anyways, just add strength to that one. And I've done that on my last couple and it seemed to really help.
Oh, that's good. Okay, thank you for that tip. So you didn't get to see like the big battery or anything that I was waving around here? Oh, shoot. Okay, I'm sorry. Well, I'll show these things again while you look at these resources. Keith, do you want to put this presentation on the CVARC website in the education page? I think I sent you the link in an email.
Yes, Andy has already got that and is taking care of that.
Okay, I'm going to share
I believe it's actually already up on the CVARC site.
Oh, okay. All right. So these are the resources I'm talking about. And I'll go back and show the equipment again since I blew it by just showing you a slide while I was holding these things up in front of the camera. There's a couple of things at the end there that might not make sense in of themselves to you. One of them is, these blogs here, one from KG6MZS and the other from N6JZT, HAL. They're full of descriptions of how to get to different SOTA peaks in our area. They've done a great job with pictures and descriptions that will help you get to the top of these places. Another help that I use too are a couple of websites that hikers go to. One of them is called Lists of John, and the other is Peak Bagger. And they often refer to each other. They are comprehensive lists of peaks, whether they're SOTA or not. And they can describe different routes to the top, how difficult it is, and so on. So if you're not sure about how to get up something and these other sources don't provide any information for where you want to go, check these out. I encourage you to join and participate in this SoCal SOTA group because they are a mix of experienced and new SOTA operators and chasers. They also do they have a listserv in groups.io that's full of information about their activities. And so you should check that out, the SoCal SOTA group. All right, I'm going to re-show the actual equipment here since you didn't get to see it, and take questions at the same time. This is my lovely IC705, but it's kind of heavy. But you know, if I can carry the weight, I put it often in a special backpack on my bicycle panniers. I'll take it because it's so nice. I found a backpack on Amazon. It has this top pocket, and the IC705 just fits right in there. It's a pretty similar design to the one that Icom sells for $169 or something, and this costs $29. And it's on Amazon, and the brand was Caden. The one catch with this one is it's a funny design. It's a one-strap backpack, so it doesn't work as a single backpack for long hikes very well. But when you hear me on the CW roll call on Monday night, it's because I hiked up my local hill with this backpack with the IC705 in it. This is the Papa Bear, the Mama Bear, and the Baby Bear of the batteries. This one was about 30 bucks on Amazon. It is not a Bioenno or some name brand or anything, but it works just fine. It has one quirk. It has an on-off switch, and that's the first battery I've seen with an on-off switch. And sure enough, I tried to charge it with it off, and I just about sent it back before I figured out to turn the switch on. You all did see my little, this is my 20-meter end-fed antenna, right? On the QRP guy's Ballon and combination winder. Like I said, this seems to work as well as the dipoles. Talked to France on it last Sunday.
Have you looked at Pactena as a
Yes.
vendor?
There are lots of specialty manufacturers who make things, and Pactena is a very good one, I think. I've seen them on eBay, and I think they have their own store as well.
Yeah,
I think
they're
I
always
noticed
sold out.
one thing I think I noticed is they don't come with their own feed line. I think you have to add a feed line. The SOTA Beams antenna came with a feed line as part of it, and these things are pretty reasonably priced. I think it's 80 or 90 bucks for this kit. I got a bigger one on eBay. This one is 10 through 80 meters, and so it's loaded with alligator clips. The only catch when I got it was that it actually wasn't 80 meters, it was 75 meters. And so I added a section to get all the way down to the bottom of the 80-meter band to do CW. And I think I only spent like 70 plus maybe $15 shipping from Canada for this. It was a very well-made one that I found on eBay. Same principle as the SOTA Beams antenna. Any more questions about activating or equipment or where to go or how to chase?
So, yeah, I have a question. You talked about the SOTA LA, I think it was the spotting site. And
Yes.
so I have this in my head that one way to do it is to, the night before you go, you post your itinerary, you know, I'm going to be on peak whatever and at this time and on this frequency. Is that what you do?
Yes. In fact, I didn't explain how to spot myself very well. And so I should do that now. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, this is the desktop version of that application that I showed a screenshot of from my phone. And you notice that there are two things here, spots and alerts. Spots are things that are happening now. And you can go chase these people right now. Alerts are plans to activate something later. Note that SOTA is very particular about using UTC or Zulu time. Almost all of it's expressed in Zulu time, which is, well, today it's 8 hours ahead of us. Tomorrow it will be 7 hours ahead of us after we spring forward. And here you can describe what peak you're going to be on and what time you'll be on. The spots you can do by using your phone while you're on the peak. Other people can spot you for you. For instance, I've been to peaks where I couldn't spot myself, but somebody heard me when I called CQ, and I asked them to spot me. Often chasers will offer. If they hear a SOTA call and you are not on this SOTA watch, then they will offer to put you there so that you can get more contacts.
Could you show an example if I wanted to be a finder for one of the activators on a local peak today using an HF, not an HF, but a VHF, UHF radio? I would probably have to filter on the area and find somebody who's on the alert side for that frequency. Is that how you do it?
Well, in part. Now that you ask, look at the top one right here, Whiskey 6 South Coast 115. So that it just updated. Let me find him again there. Where did he go? Oh, that was old information, but let's see. There it is. Somebody else on this peak here. So this is somebody on El Cajon Mountain. That's a little far. That'd be outside of San Diego for us to get to. But there's no way to filter geographically easily here that I know of. But you might be able to learn that and figure it out. And if you do, please tell us. Note that the geography is encoded in Whiskey 6 and South Coast here.
Mm-hmm. So for our local neighborhood, would it still be Whiskey 6 South Coast?
It is, although some of our local mountains are also coded as CT, transverse ranges. So between SC and CT, we've got it pretty much covered there, with a few exceptions for CC, Central Coast. And those are, I think Mount Pinos is a CC, for example.
You can double click on the right where you are, and then bring up that page, and then click on the Google Maps, and it'll show you right where it is on the Google Maps.
Exactly. So I did that, and I'm gonna let's see. Do you see Google Maps coming up now?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So it threw me in the middle on some mountain peak. That isn't very useful. So I'm going to zoom out a bunch and see if I can get the context to that. And that's a bit of a mess. So I'll turn it just the map layer on. And here you are. You can see it's northeast of San Diego.
Can you look at this kind of a view and see the activations rather than tabular, see it on the map?
No, you can't. There is no live view of current activations that I know of. That would be a lovely thing, but I don't know how to do that.
Paul, can you mention drive up peaks?
Sure.
Mount Pinos.
Well, Mount Pinos isn't quite. There's a couple of miles walk up. It's bikeable if you're tough. But an adjacent peak, Cerro Noroeste, is, and I can show you. And I can show you a couple others that are really popular drive-up peaks here. One of them is near Wrightwood. I think Angeles Crest Highway is closed now, but if you drive around, the most popular peak in Southern California is Table Mountain. This is a drive-up, and there's the indicator why it's so popular. You know, it's a high point. I think it's 8 points. It's a drive-up, so it has 160.
It's still a short hike, Paul. You
Is
still
it?
have to hike that one.
Okay. But it's the most popular SOTA peak because it's high points and easy. I'll tell you, there's a true drive up that, Ron, you were talking about just recently that is a lovely spot. Let me see if I can find it here for you.
When is it?
It's this one. It doesn't have a name, and it is off, what's this? I forget if that's Sand Canyon or something. You need to come in either through Plaza Rita Canyon and Santa Clarita or come up Big Tujunga. But there's a road all the way out to here that goes past a county fire station.
Oh, yeah.
And
Nike site. Yeah, it's a
yeah,
great
this is
drive, easy all the way.
yeah, it's a lovely spot. You can literally drive up right to where you're going to activate that.
What's it designated, SOTA?
It is Whiskey 6, Charlie Tango 158.
There's also quite a few drive ups if you have a decent four-wheel drive. It doesn't have to be a Jeep, you know, like just Subaru with good tires or something out off of the, like north of the 14.
That's right.
I attempted burn B benchmark. I just did. That one is a true four-wheel drive like Jeep needed, but there's other ones around that you can drive out.
Grass Mountain's easy. I rode my motorcycle up to Grass Mountain.
Yeah, and that I attempted that one last week. It's closed because they had a fire.
Oh, okay. So the gate's closed?
Hang on, it might have been the other. There's another one, two more near that burnt benchmark, and
there's two burned benchmarks. I was at one of them a few weeks ago. Yeah.
And then there's another one off the same road, right to your, go up north a little more there.
Yeah, okay, because the burn benchmark I went to is down here. That's a bit of a hike.
I couldn't find any information, got up there, and the gate was closed because of a fire they had there.
Okay, so these peaks in the national forests, a good source of information is the National Forest website. A better source of information is to call the Forest Service office. They'll answer and they'll tell you about gate closures, which are common at this time of the year. Also, again, lists of John, Peak Bagger, and those blogs by people like Hal and 6JZT have detailed descriptions of how to get there. Fraser Mountain is a drive up. It's up a long dirt road, but I went up there. Remember the super hot weekend we had in the fall? That's where I went to cool off. And so we spent a couple of days up there until the smoke drove us right out of there, back home. Cerro Noroeste is a drive up that has a big campground at it. But Mount Pinos is something you've got to hike up a little bit from the parking area. And the road may be closed due to snow now. In fact, all three of those high ones may be closed due to snow. Locally, my favorite place to walk up is the Beaufield Court Trail. Let's see, where is it? Right. There
2A, right? In the middle. Yeah.
There it is. Yeah. And the way you get up to this one, this is Thousand Oaks Boulevard, Lindero Canyon. You come off here and you go onto Beaufield Street and hike up to it. That is a 1 mile hike of about 400 feet of elevation gain, maybe a little more. And it has a lovely 360-degree view. I was up there for field day all day. So that's a great starter hike. Another lovely spot is Ladyface. It's also a 1 mile hike, but it is in no way a starter hike. It's tough. It's just a social trail. It's sort of crumbling, and it involves a little bit of scrambling to get up there. So this is how I decide where I'm going to go on a given day. Triunfo Lookout is a nice spot. It's about 3/4 mile hike, fairly easy trail, a bit overgrown though. Sandstone Peak is a lovely spot. It's a couple miles uphill. Very popular place. You're going to be around a lot of people. And so on. All right. I'm going to mention one more thing about HTs here, and that is many people will activate and on the calling frequency of 146.52. In our area, the calling frequency is really busy, and you will either not be able to use it because other people are doing it, or you will tie it up for a half hour because you'll get a pile up on the calling frequency. So the SoCal SOTA group recommends using 146.58. We're calling this the adventure frequency. That gets us off the calling frequency and to a place that's easily accessible with HTs, but doesn't interfere with other people's operations. Here in the Conejo Valley, I will use the local simplex frequency for area 2, which is 146.445. And again, you can announce these things on Bozo. If you're working someplace out of the Conejo Valley, you could announce it, say, on a repeater network like the PAPA system. The PAPA system encourages its use for people spotting themselves for SOTA on any frequency and any mode. Call on the PAPA system, and you're almost guaranteed to get a bunch of people coming after you. Anything else?
Can you talk a little about what information to exchange?
Yes. Okay. That's a good question. And the answer is any valid exchange is okay. The basic rule of establishing two-way communications usually is satisfied by exchanging signal reports. But SOTA does not mandate or specify what the exchange should be. So if you have established two-way communication with someone else, you're good. Whether that's in FT8, whether you're doing a contest exchange for, if you're on a day when there's a VHF contest or something, and you happen to do their contest exchange, well, that's good for SOTA too.
You mentioned 146.58 and one other frequency. What was that one?
The other frequency is the Area 2 ACS simplex frequency, 146.445.
Okay, thanks.
So before I jump back in, any other questions? I guess not. Paul, that was fantastic. Yeah, lots of thumbs ups there. And I'll stop recording in a moment, but we'll leave the meeting open. And while we're on the subject there with your batteries, I should mention that CVARC's monthly meeting on this coming Thursday is going to have a presentation from Bioenno. So
Yeah.
what a happy coincidence. Get some more questions answered about the hardware. So Gosh, thanks everybody for being here in this lesson. And we'll see you next week when Andy is going to be talking about WinLink for its use in emergency communications and how we could all be using it for our own personal management after emergencies. So Andy, why don't you wave so they could see you? Oh, actually, he may not be there. Okay, thanks everyone.